You're listening to episode 19 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I have with me Andrea Myers Miller, who's going to share her story of infertility and how she overcame it. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, I'm your host as always, and we have a really special interview for you today from a person that I met through a business program that has a really interesting and special story about her own experience with infertility and how she overcame it. And I was really honored to have this person on the show with me today because she just has so much wisdom and personal experience to share and really is a great source of hope for women who are struggling with infertility. So I'm very excited to have with us on the show today, Andrea Myers Miller. Andrea is a registered nurse, fertility coach, and she has almost 20 years of experience in the health and wellness space. She is passionate about helping others achieve optimal health in all aspects of life. Andrea's own journey with infertility nearly brought her to her knees. When she couldn't get the answers she needed from medical professionals regarding her fertility situation, she sought the answers out herself. Based on the research she found, she formulated and implemented a plan which resulted in a successful pregnancy just 3 months after her and her spouse were given a devastating prognosis about their ability to conceive on their own. Her experience with infertility led her to create the Pregnancy Achieved program, with the goal of helping couples optimize their fertility potential and conceive a healthy baby on their own. Andrea wants people in the same situation to know that an infertility diagnosis is not always written in stone and can change. And that's really why I love Andrea's perspective because, like I said, infertility can be such a challenging diagnosis and can be very distressing and depressing for people to be going through that diagnosis when working with fertility specialists. And what I love about Andrea's perspective is she really does give hope for people in their fertility journey, even if they've been given a diagnosis that seems final. So I'm very excited for you all to get to know Andrea and to hear her story. So without further ado, here is Andrea Myers Miller. All right, welcome back, everybody. I am so excited to have with me here today Andrea Myers Miller, who I actually met at an event in Arizona back in September of 2019. I was trying to remember. I think it was September. I know it was close to October, but we were both at a health business event called Healthpreneur Live. And we actually got to do some hiking together in Arizona and got to chatting. And I was just so impressed by Andrea's perspective on the topic of infertility, and just listening to her story was super inspiring, and that's why I'm really excited to have her on the call today. So welcome, Andrea. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to come chat with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
So I would love to introduce you and let you tell your story to our audience, since I'm sure a lot of them are not familiar with you, and I just want them to get to know you better so they can understand why you're so passionate about the topic of infertility. So do you mind telling us about your story? And obviously feel free to go into as much or as little detail as you want, whatever you feel called to share, just so we can get a better sense for where you've been and what you've gone through with the process of achieving pregnancy?
Absolutely. My story begins back in 2000 and, I want to say 2003. I had just gotten married, and I'm like, finally, I have the opportunity to start this family that I've always been wanting to start. Always wanted to be a mother. I remember as a teenager, I refused to smoke. I refused to drink. I ate foods based on Canada's food guide. Of course, I did, have the odd treat here and there, but I really stuck to a really disciplined regimen because I knew that when it was time to have my baby, I wanted to have a healthy baby. I wanted to have a healthy pregnancy. So I did as much as I could, trying to be as proactive as I could, even in my early years, in anticipation of becoming a mother. So in 2003, we started trying for our baby. And just a couple months into the process, my gut told me that something was wrong. We both came from fairly large families. My dad is one of 12 children. He has 4 siblings, and everybody seemed to have no issues getting pregnant. Yeah, we hatch like flies, as the saying goes sometimes. So I didn't think that, I would ever experience any problems. And, once we got started, it would be, a no-brainer. I'd be pregnant in no time. So like I said, 3 months into it, I just felt like something was wrong. And so I went to my family doctor. She's absolutely great. And, the protocol usually is if nothing happens for a year, you've been trying for a year and nothing happens, then go see your family doctor. Well, I had a great relationship with mine, so I was able to see her way before the time. She ran some tests. Everything came back normal, and she assured me, it's just a time thing. Just give it a little bit more time. And so we did. But as it was getting closer to a year, I just had this very unsettled feeling. So I went back to her again. And this time she wrote a requisition for my husband to do a sperm analysis. And when we got those results back, we were immediately referred to a fertility clinic. Right off the bat, she was seeing that the motility was 0. And she didn't want to waste any time and decided to have us go to one of the best fertility clinics in town. And they repeated that semen analysis several times, and each time it was consistently 0 motility. And so they did further investigations. They did a DNA sperm assay, and the results from that basically let us know why the sperm were not moving. So basically, the DNA of the sperm was fragmented. And just to give you some parameters for that test, if 0 to 15% of the sperm is fragmented, the DNA, you still have a pretty good chance of fathering a child. If it's between 15 to 30%, you have a fair chance of fathering a child. Anything over 30% indicates a poor predictor of fathering a child on your own. And his number was 68%. Yes. So needless to say, we were devastated. And the only option that was offered to us at the time was IVF with ICSI. I'm in Canada here, in Ontario specifically. And in this province, they now have one free round of IVF covered under our health insurance, our health plan that's open to everyone. Back then, when I was going through, the only time the procedure would be covered would be, first of all, under our private health insurance, and I had to have a pre-existing health condition, which I didn't, related to fertility, and I didn't. So I didn't qualify. Back then, the procedure was $15,000, and that wasn't including the medication that I had to take, which would be a couple more $1,000, I think about $5,000 to $6,000 on top of that. And that just was not in the budget. We had just purchased a home, and all the money had been allocated towards the home and everything that the home would require. So getting into the IVF procedure at that time just wasn't an option. And the other thing about that was I found the whole testing procedure, like all the appointments and just everything about the diagnostic procedure, very invasive, very intrusive. It took up a lot of my time personally. And at that time, I wasn't sharing with anyone about what I was going through. So I would be gone away for appointments early morning. And it came to the point where I had to talk to my manager and let her know what was going on, because I was just missing so much work, and the times were just so odd. And so what I'm trying to say is that I wasn't okay with IVF for that reason. And again, the medication list was very long. I wasn't okay with taking medication. And so I just kind of put that option on the back burner. In the meantime, I started to ask myself questions, because things were just not making sense. Again, like I said, if you look at his family in particular, his siblings the males in particular, had no issues fathering children. So I'm thinking, if this was a genetic or a family issue, it would manifest in the siblings, but it didn't. And so I started thinking, well, what would cause DNA fragmentation in a quote unquote healthy 27-year-old male? It just didn't make sense. The doctors had no answers for me. And so I started my research journey to try and get the answers, because I just knew in my heart that there had to be an explanation and another way around the situation. I am a strong believer as well. I had people in our church praying for us, hoping for the best for us, that despite the negative prognosis that we had been given, that we had conceived. And my faith journey at that point in time took a deep dive because I had nothing else. I had no one else. The information that I have now and the access that I have to resources now, I did not have 15 years ago. So it was me and God on this journey. And I'm just so grateful, after everything is said and done, just so grateful for that time, because it really did help me to really dig into my faith, and the relationship that I have with God it really started to strengthen during that time. And of course, over time has only gotten stronger. So basically, I started researching. We had people praying for us, and I started to get the answers that I was looking for as to why my husband was experiencing DNA fragmentation. And so based on what I had read, I had done a few lifestyle changes at the time, nothing major. And just a little side note, I'm a registered nurse, a conventionally trained registered nurse in that system. And so the information that I was reading was completely foreign and new to me. Like, I had never learned anything about these interventions, this information in the traditional nursing setting. And so it was very new, but I was in such a state that I didn't really question. I just kind of went along with it because I wanted my baby, and I was willing to do anything to have my baby. And the interventions were not anything outlandish. But yeah, so I implemented a couple of those strategies, and within, I want to say, about 4 or 5 months, we were pregnant. And at the time, I had no idea because I had basically resolved to living my life, enjoying as much of it as possible, because, when I had kids, I would be quote unquote on lockdown. And so I was out living life, having fun, trying some new things. And when my period was late, I didn't think anything of it because it had been late before and nothing happened. But again, I remember the day that God whispered to me and said, go and go take that pregnancy test. And so on my lunch break, I went to a walk-in clinic and had the blood work and the urine done. And the nurse gave me the great news right then and there in the office. It was like, I'll never forget that day. I will never forget that day. And then, so I had my baby, and 16 months later, I had a boy. So I had my girl first, and then I had my boy 16 months later. Again, with him, I was late. I didn't, again, think I could be possibly pregnant because we had so many issues with, conceiving my daughter, and I was breastfeeding, and I thought, okay, well, sometimes, your period is delayed or late, or it's a little bit off. So when I tested, I was like, oh my goodness, here we go again. And it was great. My third child was born 7 years later. And again, a total surprise, because that happened during a time when, let me just say that God has a sense of humor. So if I can segue into another part of my journey, my husband had said just a few weeks prior that he wanted a separation. He wanted a divorce. And so when I found out that I was pregnant, that kind of took me for a loop, It has really strengthened my faith in God, and my trust in God, and to know that He's still in control, and what I'm seeing manifesting in the natural realm, He has bigger and better plans in the spiritual realm. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that point up, and I can talk about that more. But yeah, I have 3 beautiful children, and never really intended on coaching per se to help other people. I thought, okay, I have my children. At minimum, I can be an encouragement to a friend, or if I hear of somebody going through the journey, I can share with them some resources that kind of helped me during the time. But God had other plans. And so one morning He woke me up out of my bed and said, you're going to share your infertility journey on social media. And I said, okay. You do know that my video skills are emerging, because at that time I think just a month prior, I had taken a course on video and social media and the importance and whatnot, and thought, okay, I would incorporate that into my business. And so I'd done some videos on other stuff like immune system fundamentals and whatnot. So when he said, share your journey, I said, okay, if this is what you're saying, I'll go with that. But just so you know, you've seen me do videos before, and it takes me hours just to do a 3-minute video. And I have a networking event, at noon. So we're going to have to get this show on the road pretty quickly if this is going to happen. And true to his word, I got that video cranked out and posted on Facebook before noon. And that was, trust me, a miracle if you've seen me do a video before. So anyhow, I posted it, and it got some people liked, some people commented and shared and all that kind of stuff. And then I heard him say, you need to boost that ad on Facebook. And I'm thinking, wow, like now I'm starting to feel exposed and vulnerable. I don't want, my story to be out there. I'm okay sharing, one-on-one, but I just wasn't feeling like telling my story to the world. But I did it anyways. And nothing really came of it, in the short term. But then about a month after that, I had a call. So I was scrolling through Instagram and saw a post for Healthpreneur, which is how we're connected. And just the coaching program and what they had to offer and how they could help me with my program and whatnot. I thought, okay, I'll watch the webinar and, take the call and whatnot and see what can come of it. And when I had my first coaching call, my intention was still to focus on other health related things. I have a business called Live in Prevention, which is very prevention oriented and talks about health and all that good stuff. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do a coaching program based on that program. But after having a couple conversations with Yuri, I realized that fertility was the right way to go. And it's been nothing but confirmation after confirmation ever since that day that this is indeed the path that God has called me to. And so, yeah, that's how I got started. Kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, it's great. I think that's so awesome to hear what you've been through and how you're using your experience to help others? Because I really feel like no matter what we go through in life, from a faith-based perspective, the way that God uses it so often is to help others through that same process or that same experience. So I think that's so awesome that you were obedient and you were listening. And even if it felt scary, you decided, you know what, I'm going to do it, even though I don't feel super comfortable with this, or this isn't something I'm used to, or feeling like, excited about, oh yeah, I'm going to go shoot a video, because I definitely empathize with the nerves that can come up when you need to shoot a video. So, and out of curiosity, so was your infertility from a physiological perspective, was it 100% your husband, or were you struggling with some issues that were affecting your ability to get pregnant?
Yeah, so they felt like, based on the medical diagnosis, they felt that it was a male factor issue. All of my tests came back within the normal range. I had the lovely HSG, the hysterosalpingogram with the dye and everything. I had all the blood tests done. I had the ultrasound, like the whole 9 yards, and everything came back within normal range. However, I must say, even though they said that it was a male factor issue, there was always a part of me that believed that I played a part too as well. And again, at the time, I did not have the knowledge base to substantiate that thought. But looking back 15 years, and again, based on the information that I've learned since then, I believe I did have some underlying issues that didn't get uncovered by traditional tests. And even when it comes to my program, I don't do the whole male factor, female factor issue. I work with both the man and the woman, because I believe that even if one partner has been given like the clean bill of health, so to speak, there are always ways to optimize health for both individuals.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We did an episode, if people are wanting to go back to listen to our interview with Corey Levin, we were talking about how to get pregnant with PCOS. And I think it's interesting, like, so often women are taking the brunt of, I don't want to say the blame, but kind of like, if there's infertility, a lot of times women are feeling that their own body is to blame. And so often men are not as participatory, or like not as willing to be evaluated to see if it might be actually from something related to their health. But like you said, I mean, I don't think looking at it as like it's either male factor or female factor is helpful for anybody, because even if somebody has a condition that makes it harder to get pregnant, it doesn't mean that the other person is completely, I don't want to say off the hook. Like, it just means, it needs to be a partner experience, and not just one person, trying to get their body healthy enough to get pregnant. So even if somebody gets a male factor diagnosis, it sounds like we would both agree that both the man and the woman should be doing what they can to optimize their fertility.
Exactly. Yeah, because we live on planet Earth, as you know.
What?
Yeah. And as long as we're living on planet Earth, we know that our air, our water, and our soils are not what they used to be. The foods that we're eating are not what they used to be. The things that the personal care products that we bring into our home are not what they used to be. For the most part, people are living a mainstream lifestyle. There are a lot of factors that can impact fertility rather. And not to say that if you eat like a Twinkie, you're going to be infertile or anything, but you have to look at your genetics. You need to know what your genetics are like, because what affects one person may not necessarily affect another. But there are enough things on planet Earth that are impacting our fertility. And it's evident, the birth rate is rapidly declining, and they can't blame it on, couples are holding off until having kids later on in their their life. There are other things at play. And so, yeah, you can't just say, oh, just focus on this one person. You need to focus on the couple. It takes two to have a child. So you need to focus on the couple and ensure that the fertility is optimized for both parties involved.
And actually, that leads me to a question that I didn't necessarily plan on asking, but it definitely is important, I think. In the church community, I feel like typically when somebody's dealing with infertility, there's one of two things that happen. One is that they keep it to themselves and they don't tell anybody because they're embarrassed by it, or it just feels very private. It doesn't feel like something that they're comfortable sharing, so that they don't actually ask for prayer, and then they don't get it because they're not asking for it. Or they are sharing it with people and it's something that they are asking for prayer around, but that's kind of the extent of what they're doing. And I would love to hear your opinion on the balance between receiving prayer, yourself praying. We've, in my own church at home, we've had some really pretty miraculous conceptions in the last couple of years. So like we've seen it for sure. We even have I have a blog post that I'll link to in the show notes about one of my good friends who got pregnant. I don't want to say unexpectedly, but like literally was diagnosed with infertility, and prayer was what was the solution for that. But I also think, like you said, there's a lot that we're getting exposed to in our environment, in the food that we eat, all the things that are making it harder for us to get pregnant and that are affecting our fertility rates. So where do you see the balance between faith and action when it comes to dealing with infertility?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that question, because I had a call with someone today just about this very same topic. So she is a believer. She is a strong believer. And one of the things that she was saying to me was, I'm waiting on God. I'm going to trust God, for my child. I believe that God will heal me and bless me with a child. And let me say, I said to her, I started off by saying, I agree with you 100% as somebody who's in relationship with God. I know that God can snap his fingers if he wants, and you can have 2 or 3 babies just like that, because God is God. But I also know that God sends people into our lives to lead us, to whether it be a resource or a person to help us to get the answers that we need to conceive. And so I shared with her, I'm not sure if you heard the story about the man who was caught in the flood, and he was on his roof wanting to be rescued, before, the water levels rose, and he drowned. And so he was praying to God, God, please help me, please rescue me from this come. And so a couple minutes after that prayer, a man in a rowboat came by and said, hey, you on the roof, come, let's get you to safety before the waters rise. And the man on the roof said, no, thanks. I'm waiting on God to rescue me. So the guy in the rowboat carries on in his way. And then a police officer comes in his speedboat and says, hey, I see that you need some help. Come, I'm going to help you, come off the roof and get to safety so the waters don't rise any further and make you drown. And he said, no, thanks. I'm waiting on God to rescue me. And the helicopter comes from, in the sky, and they pull down a rope, toss down the rope, and say to the gentleman, okay, here's a rope, just grab onto it and we'll hoist you up to safety. And the man says, no, I'm waiting on God. So what happens? Eventually the man drowns. And when he gets to heaven, he asks God, I asked you to help me. Why didn't you help me? And God said, well, I sent a rowboat, I sent a speedboat, and I sent a helicopter, but you didn't want that. So I use that example to illustrate that, God has many ways of showing up for people and answering their prayers and giving them the desires of their heart. He doesn't have to, it's not about snapping the fingers sometimes, but as you said, miracles do happen. I had a client who I was treating her for something other than infertility. And she said, she's also faith-based. And she said she just went to like a healing room and had somebody prayed for her. And she didn't do any dietary changes, nothing. and been struggling for 10 years to have a baby. And about 6 months later, she conceived and had her boy. So yes, God has many different ways of working. And I think if somebody presents you with like another viable option, it's worth discerning. Okay, is it from God, or is it something else? Like, discern. I think a lot of people will dismiss information, and that could be just what they need to get the answer that they're looking for. So just to be open. Like I said, I have a conventional medical training, so reading up on antioxidants, and fruits and vegetables to help, with sperm, that just sounds so unscientific, right? But when you go to PubMed, all the information is there and it's been substantiated. We just weren't taught we weren't taught that stuff in school, So it's just about being open and asking questions.
Yeah. Well, and I love the word discernment that you used, where it's like, listen, nobody's saying that you have to go spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars and see 20 different practitioners and just completely be trying to take matters into your own hands on everything. But I also think the flip side of that, where you're saying, well, God's going to fix this for me, and then not doing anything about it, like not actually taking any action. I feel like that's not the appropriate response either, because like you said, God does heal miraculously, and he also has created humans that can solve problems for each other and can help each other. And because listen, I'm not going to speak for God, obviously, but I can only imagine if the only opportunity to solve any problem that we ever faced was to pray about it and get help from God. Like, why would we even have communities? Why would we have relationships with people? Like, God's created us to be in relationship and to serve each other and to help each other. And, a lot of what we can do is helping each other in our communities and everything. But even if you're paying for support, this is something that we have to learn as entrepreneurs, because I feel like you don't get taught this as a normal, having a normal job or whatever. If you're working at a hospital as a nurse versus an entrepreneurial nurse, you have to kind of think about money differently. But even just thinking about paying someone as being an exchange of value, it's just something that they're providing a service, and you paying for that service doesn't mean that you're like not listening to God or you're not getting help from God. It just means you're exchanging value so that that person who's providing that service can continue to provide that service and to be able to spread their message and to be able to get that help into the hands of more people. So I just think it's important for Christian women to see that it's not an either or question when it comes to prayer versus getting like physiological intervention.
Yes.
It's more of a both and, God can do amazing things without any sort of human intervention. And he also created us to be intelligent and to be resourceful and to be able to solve problems and to be able to help each other, because we're created in his image. So we can solve problems for each other too. So I think that's an important topic that we don't talk about a lot, because it's just, I don't know, obviously talking about religion in general can be a little taboo. And then certainly in the health field, it's not something that we talk about a whole lot. So I'm glad that you and I can have that conversation. And I know that before we jumped on our recording, you were telling me that you feel like the word hope is a word that, I don't know if that's just specifically this year or like just a general theme that you've been experiencing through this whole journey of fertility and divorce and all this stuff that's happened to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you feel like that word has shown up for you in your life?
Absolutely. So I remember one day, this is going back again 15 years, and I was on a phone call with my mother, and I was sharing with her the latest test results, again, from the sperm DNA assay. Actually, it wasn't the assay, it was just the regular analysis. And the number in terms of motility, went from 0.0 to 0.01 something or another, and I said to my mom, I'm like, wow, like, look at this. It hasn't even budged. It hasn't moved. Like, this is not good. And my mom said to me, and I will never forget this for as long as I live, she said to me, Andrea, that number that you see there, that improved number, that larger number, that number represents hope. So that was the first time that I had heard that. And like I said, internalized that. That number means hope. Fast forward to about 7 years ago when the divorce situation came on the site. And here I was. I had 2 children. They're about 8 and 7, pregnant with a third. The future just looked so uncertain. It looked bleak. It just looked dismal. And I was just like, I'm here wondering, like, how is life going to look, going forward for myself and my children? Where are we going to live? What am I going to do for work? Who's going to help me take care of the children? It seemed like a really hopeless situation. And it's interesting how my journey through infertility was one of hope. Because like I said, we had a very dismal prognosis in terms of conceiving on our own. And so that word hope is what carried me through that time. And it's interesting how it came back. And I had to renew my hope again, and believe and trust God that when the circumstance looks so dismal, what my carnal eyes saw, God in the spiritual realm saw something completely different. He saw hope for myself and my children. He saw good things. He sees good things planned for us. He has a hope and a future for us, as the scripture says, and earlier this year, I had a chance to share my journey through divorce and how God has brought me through with my church family. So I had to do a video, and that was a joke because, again, it was maybe a 3-minute clip, and it took me about an hour and a half. The poor guy, pastor interviewing me, was just probably like, "Oh my goodness, this girl! Like, really? It's just a video." But anyways, I had the opportunity to share that story with the congregation, and again, that Hope Has a Name was the title of the series, and it was such a blessing, and just, I don't know how to describe, just so awesome to see how God had turned a potentially dismal situation into something so good. And our story has not ended; it's still continuing, but just so awesome to see how God has worked in our lives, just with me hoping, just really fostering that hope and believing, and hoping for the best. And so that has been a big, like I said, it's been a big thing for me. And it's interesting, I was at a single mother's retreat in October. So again, to show you how powerful this word is. And I had been to the single mother's retreat. This was the 3rd year that I was attending. And they gave us all T-shirts, these beautiful T-shirts. And guess what word was written on the T-shirt? Hope. Hope. So I thought, wow, this is just amazing. So it's interesting with my program. Like I said, that whole theme of hope is huge for me. So a couple of the recordings that I've done, I've actually worn the T-shirts so people can see, the word hope. It's such a big thing for me. And at the end of the day, I think with everything that I've been through, I just want to convey the message to people that there is hope. No matter how rough and bad things look, on the tough days, you just feel like giving up. You're wondering, what's the point of all of this? It's so important to hope and to just take another step forward, and walk into what God has in store for us, because it is good things. We may not be able to see it with our eyes, but He has good things for us.
And with the idea of building hope when somebody's feeling hopeless, especially in the case of fertility or infertility, are there any practical steps or Because I always love to give actionable things for people if possible. Because, talking about hope, it can feel very big and just kind of like, well, how do I feel hope? What if my numbers are actually getting worse and not better? Like what would be some steps somebody could take to really build on that hope that can pull them through those tough times?
Yeah. So with infertility, not only do some people experience physical pain, but emotional pain is huge too. If you go on the Instagram, the infertility community on Instagram, you'll see the emotional pain is intense. And, 15 years after my journey, going back on, and interacting with the community, I can still, like, what they're feeling has not changed. I can still relate to those feelings of hopelessness. So the first thing I would say to someone, it is 100% okay to feel that pain. Feel the pain, feel the disappointment, mourn and grieve as you need to, as you must, but don't stay there. Don't stay there, because when you stay there, you can get into a situation where you become hopeless and on the verge of despair. And I can speak to this because I've been there. I've been there. So it's very important to seek out, if you're not able to speak with your spouse, or you don't have a friend that you feel understands your issue, it becomes very important to step out and to find the supports that you're needing. So like I said, for me, when I was kind of spiraling downwards, I reached out to my church family. I actually emailed the pastor and said, this is what's going on. And they were great. They came alongside us. They prayed with us. I received counseling, which helped along the journey. I did have a couple friends that didn't understand the depths of what I was going through, but understood enough that, when things were getting rough, at work. So just to, again, backtrack, at that time, I was a public health nurse working in the Healthy Babies and Healthy Children program. So I dealt with a lot of people that were pregnant, just had children. I actually was teaching prenatal classes, even though I didn't have kids. I was teaching prenatal classes. And so some days, and on top of that, coworkers all around me having babies, because that was just the time, right? So it was a very tough, it was a rough time. It was rough. But like I said, I had two coworkers that could see, that I was heading down a rough path, and they would whisk me out of the office. We'd go for a walk and just kind of, take my mind off of things. So having good supports, not staying in, the hopelessness state and despair. And the other thing too, what I did, I went online to find more people like myself. There wasn't Instagram back then, but I found faith-based support groups that I could share my hurts and my concerns with, but also to get practical advice as to how to move forward. And so at the time, I ended up joining 3 different groups during that time. The first one wasn't very... didn't help my case too much. The group was called Childless Not by Choice, and this is a faith-based group. And so, as the name implied, you can just imagine the conversations that took place. It wasn't very productive. And so, I left that group because it was they were stuck in that state of hopelessness and despair. And I was looking for solutions. I wanted to be more proactive. What can I do? So I'm praying, what else can I do? So I left that group and then joined Hannah's Prayer Ministries, which I believe is still around today. And I found that group had a mixture of people that were still in that state of hopelessness and despair. But then there were also some people that were believe in God, that, despite how things looked, they were claiming his promises to be a mother of children, joyful mother of children. They were claiming those promises. But for me, I found that it was too wishy-washy. So I moved on. And so the last group I joined was Narita Walker. She's in based in Australia, and she still has her group going. Back then it was called Women in Faith. It was a Yahoo group that we joined, and she has an incredible story to herself of infertility and overcoming. So she has 4 children to date now, and her husband has 0 sperm. Yeah, so when I heard her story, I was like inspired, you know? And even though she didn't have any information to offer me beyond prayer, the information that she had, the scriptural readings, there's so many lessons that she offered, and that just strengthened my faith and to help me to believe, it was integral in getting me out of that state of despair and hopelessness, you know, and just to have somebody like-minded who can be in agreement with you spiritually, like it's powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that, like, if you're feeling hopeless in a situation, there's going to be very little action of any type that you would be taking. So you probably would end up not being like not actively praying and not actively believing that it's going to happen. So that's one aspect that would get affected. And then the actual like physiological stuff, if you know, if you're feeling hopeless, why would you take steps to seek out a doctor or, you know, try a supplement or make a diet change or something like that if you feel like, well, nothing that you do is going to work. So I feel like the hope piece, I mean, obviously it makes a huge impact on your emotional and mental health throughout the process. But yes, I think also with the results that you would get, it's going to affect the way that you actually tackle the problem. And if you're going to keep trying to find solutions or if you give up. So that hope piece I can see beyond just being like, you know, making people feel better throughout the process. I think it does actually play into a person's outcomes and what they're able to achieve.
Definitely. I think when you're in a more hopeful state, again, you're more open to potential resources around you. But more importantly, it allows you to ask questions, you know, questions that you wouldn't think of normally when you're in a hopeless state, you know? So I know in a hopeless state, sometimes you're like, what, why me? Why? You know, I find that's not a great question to ask, but when you're feeling hopeful, well, how can I do this? Well, what about this resource? You know, who can I speak to? You know, where can I go? When you're in a more hopeful state, those kind of questions tend to come out a lot more.
Well, and I think sometimes when people think about the word hopeful, I feel like they assume that means that you're just like super positive and you just never feel negatively about anything. And, you know, it's just that kind of like Pollyanna kind of perspective, which I don't even think that's what hope is. I think hope is more about believing that there is a solution to the problem. And you know that that solution, either God's going to, like you said, snap his fingers and it's going to appear, or it's in the world, it exists right now, and that it's just a matter of time before you find it. So I feel like, you know, people who struggle with the idea of hope, I think a lot of times it's because they feel like you can't be hopeful and sad or angry or like frustrated at the same time. And I feel like allowing yourself to feel those emotions that you're experiencing, then also saying, and even though I feel this way, that doesn't mean that this is a hopeless situation. That doesn't mean that there is no solution or that this is permanent. So, which is a lot harder. It's a lot easier said than done to have that, to hold space for both of those emotions and both of those feelings and beliefs. But I do think that what can prevent people from actually taking hold of hope is this belief that, well, hope just means you never question it or you never doubt anything. And I don't think that that's the case.
No. And it's interesting because there will be some people that will post hope quotes. Like, again, this is in the infertility community. And sometimes that message is not very well received. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Because the goal at the end of the day, the desire, the dream is to have a baby. So you need to start, like, you can't begin to achieve that from a state of hopelessness. So if somebody's trying to encourage you, and I think, as you said, like, people have their ideas of what they think hope is. And yeah, and many people think, okay, it's wishful thinking, you know? So it's a concept that's hard for some, you know? But I believe if you don't have hope or try to foster that hope, try to, you know, get that hope, you don't have anything. There's really not much more you can do. You know, hope is critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I feel like in the faith-based community, that idea of being let down or feeling like angry that people are posting the message of hope, I feel like that happens when somebody has become bitter about the situation. Because at the end of the day, like, I know I can't remember what song this is, but there's a worship song that the lyric is like, even if he doesn't, and then there's like different things that it says after that. And the idea is that you don't stop believing in the possibility of the outcome that you want, whether that's pregnancy or something else. It kind of doesn't really matter. You believe that it's going to happen and that God's promises are true and that you'll receive what he's promised to you. And you also don't hinge your relationship with him on whether or not the thing happens. And and from a conceptual perspective, it's super easy to say that. Obviously, in practice, it's a lot harder to say, I believe that something's going to happen, but even if it doesn't, I will still praise you. I will still love you. I'll still, you're my, hope, and you're my joy and everything, even if this thing that I want that I know would bring me joy if I had it is maybe, it's not something I see in my life right now. So it's hard. And I think this can apply to so many different areas of our lives. But at the end of the day, if you start to develop bitterness towards God, towards other people that are trying to encourage you through a difficult situation, then, at the end of the day, like, that's just, first of all, adding insult to injury. Like, you're not receiving what you're looking for, and you're also creating more negativity and more unhappiness around the situation. And I think it's really easy to start getting angry with God about it. And that affects just everything that you experience in your whole life. So we don't want people going in that direction. Like, I feel like there's either that despair and hopelessness direction that somebody can go in, or there's the anger and bitterness direction. And I don't think either of those are desirable outcomes. So we need to think about how can we wrestle with not experiencing something that we want and something that God, we believe, has promised to us, or, God says is good. So it's something that we're not, going against God's word to desire. How do we combine that with the belief that no matter what happens, God is still good? Because even for your journey, where you're at in your own stage of just the journeys you've been on, you have this really awesome resolution from the infertility journey. But with the divorce, obviously divorce is not something that you go into marriage wanting or hoping for or anything like that. But you're able to get through that experience, hoping in God that he's going to use it for his good, and that your family will prosper and everything like that. And it doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. It just means that you're able to handle them because you do have that foundation in God, and your foundation is not in your marriage, or, if somebody's infertile, your foundation is not in whether or not you become a mother. So I know it's so tough though. It's like so much easier to talk about this stuff than it is to actually deal with it. And, I definitely don't want to sound callous or anything. I haven't been even trying to get pregnant yet, so I can't say what my fertility situation is, but it is something that I have a lot of friends dealing with. So I do see the various ways that people handle the diagnosis. And I know that there's healthy, spiritually healthy ways, and then there are spiritually damaging ways.
Yes. Yeah, I can speak with the divorce situation. You don't want to. One of the things that was very important to me was that I did not go down that road of bitterness or anger, and it is, at the beginning, it was really hard to say, God, are you good? you know, kind of forgetting all that he's done for me in the past, And so I had to work through that. And you're right. Nobody goes into marriage thinking, well, I can't wait for this divorce. It's not what I wanted. But at the end of the day, God is still good. In fact, he's awesome. Like the way that he's taken care of me through this journey of divorce, it's like I don't even have words to explain. He's been so good to myself. He's been good to my children. He's brought people into our lives to walk alongside us, to love on us, So yeah, at the end of the day, no matter what happens in life, we need to be able to say, God is still good, and I kind of feel like I've moved on. My infertility situation is now past, but I feel like I can relate, even though I'm not dealing with infertility, I can relate with individuals going through that journey because of the divorce journey that I have walked on and what that requires of me, spirit-wise, to, again, not get in a state of hopelessness and to move forward with life. At the end of the day, no matter what, life does go on and we must move forward. And again, easier said than done most days, but we don't want to get stuck where we're living in a physical sense, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally, we're dead. It's not a great place to be,
And I know you mentioned a couple times your program, which is your program called Pregnancy Achieved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. So in that program, is that a faith-based program for infertility?
Well, I love, because when I work in a traditional, conventional setting, that those conversations are frowned upon unless it's, one-to-one or the person brings it up first. So one thing that I love about my program, before I even put together the content, I said that God, I call him my not so silent business partner. And so this foundation that I built my program on, it's built on, the relationship that I have with God. He's at the center. I'm not quoting scriptures, every other week, but yes, there definitely is a faith-based component, especially when we talk about mindset and which is not just, mental health, it's spiritual health and emotional health. And so I proudly share my journey of faith and how it helped me through the dark times of my infertility journey. And I'm actually thinking about implementing a prayer group. So for anybody that's wanting to be prayed for, like it could be infertility related, it could be, relationship related, but to add that as a component to the program, because prayer is powerful. And when you have, two or more in agreement, like amazing things can happen. So yes, I fully I have integrated faith into my program. It's who I am. And I would not be here. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for God. End of story. I wouldn't be here. So, I'm not in the conventional setting anymore. I can say my piece. I want to be free to be me, myself. It's a part of who I am. It's a big part of who I am. So yeah, most definitely it's involved in my program.
That's awesome. And that's a big reason why I love being an entrepreneur, because it's like, the idea of being able to create a faith-based health program in a conventional setting. I mean, like you're lucky if you don't get fired talking about religion. And so it's one of these things where we both know the power of faith and of mindset and belief and everything in the process of healing from whatever health challenge somebody's experiencing. So the ability to combine those two into one resource is so awesome. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think somebody who is a strong believer and that's a big part of their life, they're not going to like completely compartmentalize their journey. Like if they're dealing with infertility, it's unlikely that they're just going to be like, this is not related to my spiritual life whatsoever. I mean, maybe that happens, but I would think that they're not just totally leaving that off the table with any conversation with God or their peers in their church or anything like that. But, being able to actually have conversations about health from a faith-based perspective, even if you're not, like you said, even if you're not quoting scripture directly, just knowing that you have that belief and knowing that everything that you talk about is not going to go against God's word or have somebody do something that would feel dishonoring to God or just ignorant of their relationship with him. It's I think that in and of itself is very valuable, and adding something like a prayer group or, having some scriptures or something that somebody can download and put in their wallet or something like that. All of that definitely improves a person's experience. But at the end of the day, I think it's just knowing that the person that created the program is creating it with God in mind and with him helping. Talk about having the most helpful research and development partner. It's you have the Holy Spirit guiding. It's well, even if I'm not 100% sure about something, if I feel like God's telling me to do it, I can feel confident that it's going to be helpful to somebody. So that's awesome that you're able to do that. And I would love to know just because this is kind of I don't want to say it fell in your lap, but it sounds like you woke up and God was like, go do this. And you're like, okay. So it sounds like this wasn't something that you necessarily had planned for, but is a big part of your life now. So what is your big vision for the work that you're doing with the Pregnancy Achieved program? And what's the impact that you hope to have on the world through that work?
Yes. So I want people to know, couples to know that before they rush to IVF or IUI, medications, that type of thing, just to know that there are other alternatives. Obviously, in a conventional setting, they're going to promote what they believe will help achieve pregnancy. But I think it's very important for people to know that they have other options. Again, speaking to this lady today, she feels that she was not given informed consent in regards to choices. And that's a big thing with me, informed consent and just having people have all the information that they need to make the best decision for them. Because some people will still go ahead and choose IVF. That's what they want. But people need to know that there are other alternatives outside of assistive reproductive therapies. They also need to be aware that there are risks that do take place with those therapies as well, and to get as much information about that. And so if there are people that are having questions about the procedure and they're not settled, but again feel that their provider is not giving them the full details, well, that's a conversation that I can have on a phone call, with that individual. What else? So now this is kind of selfish. So I would love for people to have the babies, but the selfish part of me wants people to have this awareness about the abundant life, and I'm talking now not spiritual, but the physical health. God wants us to be healthy. And there are clearly things in our environment that are affecting our health, and people don't have that awareness. Like I said, I have this other business, Live in Prevention. I'm a huge prevention fan. Remember, I started my journey for, becoming a mom in my teen years, and, not smoking, not drinking, not all these things that, that could impact fertility. I'm very prevention oriented. That is my heart's call. And so what I would love is, after these couples have their miracle babies, that they can see, oh, well, there's a completely different way of living life. It can be fun and I can be healthy. The other thing about, just making a few lifestyle changes is the impact is not just reserved for the couple because they have their child, but their child, future generations are now positively impacted because they'll have an awareness of what is required to have a healthy lifestyle and to stay away from those things that compromise health. And even if they are exposed to some of those things, they'll have the tools and the strategies, because like I said, we have computers in our house, we have cell phones, whatever, and nobody's going to throw those things out the window. but how do we use those things strategically so that it doesn't impact our health in a negative way? So I would love for that message to get out, to the world, that, and prevention is a tough sell. We've heard that said in many, many circles, but I think, looking at it from, oh, I have my baby and how did I get my baby and what did I do, and approaching it that way, I think can be very powerful. So that's my thing, is just, I want people to know that they can be in good health. They don't have to age, they have this thing about aging. You have to, you're in pain, you can't see, all these things are affected. You can age gracefully. You can live well, and I think it starts preconception. When I started living prevention, I remember speaking to an advisor at the business center, and he said, what segment of the population do you want to work with? And I said, well, ideally, I would love to work with women in the preconception space. I think I was speaking prophetically back then, Ideally, I would love to work with women in the preconception stage, because that is where you can make the most impact in terms of living a healthy life going forward. So again, from a prevention standpoint. It's just funny. It's just interesting how things have come full circle, for me. But that is my heart's call. Is I don't like it. It pains me when I see people suffering. Worse when I see children suffering, and that our children these days are much less healthier than their parents, and stats say that the children are dying before the parents are dying. There's something very wrong with that, and it's our lifestyle. And so I just want to again share that message of hope. This is not something that we need to accept. There are ways that we can go about ensuring that we live the best life possible, because God called us to have an abundant life. He wasn't just speaking off the top of his head, and he wasn't just speaking in terms of spiritual. We can have great physical health as well. We just need to know what to do. So yeah, that's my big vision for Pregnancy Achieved.
Kind of the getting them pregnant in the first place is kind of just the first step, right? Because then helping them learn a healthier lifestyle for themselves is then going to translate into how they raise their kids. Because I would imagine somebody who learns all this stuff about food and environmental toxins and things like that, they're not going to then say, oh, well, we're not going to raise our kids like this. If anything, they're going to be even more dedicated to making sure their kids are well taken care of. So I can definitely imagine the ripple effect that work will have on the future generations, because they'll be getting a better start than those of us who, with the internet and everything, we know so much now that our parents didn't know, our grandparents might not have known. And we do live in a different world where there's things that we have to be cautious about that didn't exist 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So it's one of these things where, my goal on this podcast, being called the Fed and Fearless podcast, is to help people approach their health in a way that is not fear-based. So that's something that I love about the work that you're doing, is it's like, hey, there are strategies that are important and can be really beneficial towards better health and fertility and all that. But also we have to take it from a hope-based perspective that God's in control and he will guide us in the right decisions, and we don't have to be afraid. So I love the work that you're doing. And I have one more question that I do ask all of my guests. And that is, what do you believe makes a person more than a body?
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, if I elaborate on it, then it's gonna, what's the word?
Ain't my answer.
Yeah, I don't want to lead the witness or anything. So
yeah,
there's no wrong answer though. So you could say whatever you want and it'll be correct.
Well, God has a plan and a purpose for all of us. We didn't come to earth just to take up space and to look good. He's deposited gifts within us. And he has awesome ways of connecting us with people and orchestrating certain situations to carry out his mission and to see him glorified. So no man is an island. You're not here for yourself. you're not just a body. You're here to help make the world a better place.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's the best I could come up with.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I put everybody on the spot. And like I said, I just like to know what you think about that question and where your mind goes when I ask that. So thank you for playing along and sharing that. I love the answer that you gave. So
thank you.
Anyway, so I know that you have a lot more to share on the topic of infertility with people. We probably could have a whole nother podcast episode on the actual nuts and bolts of dealing with infertility, but you do have some resources available that people can check out. So where can our listeners go to find out more about the program that you offer and how you work with your clients in the Pregnancy Achieve program?
Yes. So if you go to www.pregnancyAchieve.com, there you're able to sign up to view my webinar. It's just a masterclass about 40 minutes in length, and it really gives a different perspective, maybe a perspective that for the most part people haven't heard of, in terms of how I look at infertility. And this is based on my experience and the people that I've spoken with in this realm. So that is like the best starting point, and it'll give some information about the program and the opportunity to have further discussions on a phone call. I also have a Facebook page, again, at Pregnancy Achieved, where I post. Again, you won't see a lot of information on IVF because you can get that on the internet. Like, that is seen as, the gold standard for infertility. So I will share articles. Okay. So my most recent one that I shared was a story of a faith-based couple who did conceive naturally. I'm not sure if they had done any lifestyle changes or not. That's not mentioned in the article, but you can view their story there. My purpose is to instill hope and to let people know that there are other ways of achieving their goal of conception, having a baby, other than the conventional realm. I also share just little tips and tricks, if people are looking for more information. I don't go too deep into the education. That's more reserved for the program. And I don't want to convey the message that, well, if you eat this, like I posted something like tomatoes and lycopene and how it enhances, sperm numbers and whatnot. I don't want to encourage the magic bullet mentality, but just want to, again, show people that there are research studies that show that diet does matter. Because the other thing that you'll hear from practitioners in the infertility world is that, hey, you can eat anything, food has no impact on your infertility. And most certainly they are not talking about the home environment at all. And so I share that kind of information with people. And I also have an Instagram account, and that's where I like to share, again, hope quotes, information there as well.
Great. Well, we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in learning more about how Andrea works with her clients or what kind of approaches that she takes when she's helping somebody overcome infertility, we'll make sure that everybody has access to those resources. But I'm just very grateful that you were able to come on the show with us today and share this message of hope for the couples that are experiencing infertility and showing them that there are ways to achieve pregnancy, both through faith and through practical steps.
Yeah, Laura, thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a pleasure to discuss infertility with you today, and from a faith-based perspective. It's very refreshing to be able to openly share my faith with another like-minded individual for the betterment of society.
Yes, awesome. Well, thanks to those of you who hung out with us today and listened to the full episode. If you like what you heard, definitely come and either comment on the episode page itself on lauraschoenfeldrd.com, or you can send Andrea a message on Instagram. Let her know what you thought about today's show. So anyway, we will see you here next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. Hey, everyone. Laura Schoenfeld here again. Are you one of the nearly 45% of female athletes who experience menstrual irregularity? Have you gone more than 3 months in a row without a period? If so, keep listening because I have a special training just for you. As a women's health expert and functional medicine dietitian, I've successfully helped hundreds of women recover their periods quickly with my evidence-based holistic approach, whether they had hypothalamic amenorrhea, polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, or post-birth control syndrome. Seeing these women recover their hormonal health, get their period back, and even get pregnant was truly a joy. And I knew I just had to get this information out to as many women as I could. And I can't wait to share this truly life-changing information with you too. That's why I'm excited to share with you my free online video training, How to Get a Regular Period Without Birth Control. On this free training, you'll learn why any woman who wants to get her period back and get pregnant should not take the birth control pill. The single most important thing women must know about following the right diet if they want to get their period back and prepare for a healthy pregnancy. Why quitting exercise isn't necessary for period recovery, but you do have to have the right approach to working out. Why chasing weight gain or even weight loss is a total waste of time when trying to recover a normal menstrual cycle. You'll also learn 5 common myths preventing so many women from getting their period back so they can get pregnant naturally. And even their doctors are confused about these 5 myths. I'll also show you how to save time and money on your journey to becoming a mom and starting a family. And finally, you'll learn my proven 4-step protocol that has helped dozens of women get their periods back so they can get pregnant fast and without using risky medications. So if you want to get your period back quickly without resorting to birth control, quitting exercise, or giving up the healthy lifestyle that you love, then this free online workshop is for you. To get instant access to the free training, go to getyourperiodback.com. You'll learn everything you need to know about recovering a regular, healthy period without giving up the healthy foods and exercise that you love. Check it out at getyourperiodback.com, and I'll see you on the training.